Hmm. Thanks, River City Sagas. Thank you. Very nice. Glad you're here. Whoa. Thanks, George. Appreciate everybody coming in here. Yeah, so late for everything today. God, how you connected? Like how are you connected? Oh. So the music is playing. I just put it as a source in TikTok Studio. And I just click play. This song, this is just something that I generated in Suno. Oh, we have a guest, so let's go ahead and get started. Hey,
Hello?
Hodge. Hi, Hodge. How are you tonight?
I'm good, how are you, man?
I'm good, thank you. Are you at least 18?
Yeah, I'm 18.
Okay. And what prompt do you want to engage with tonight?
Yeah, I think God exists. I'm pretty sure that's one of the prompts, right? Like God's existence.
Yeah, that's the third one.
Or,
Neither are real, yeah.
okay. Alright, yeah. I think I want to give, like, random fine tuning as the reason to believe God exists. I think that the fact that life can exist in this universe is more expected in theism than any of the competing hypotheses, and that's just to imply that the probability of theism is higher than the competitors, all else equal. See, that's like one reason I want to give in support of theism. We can go through that.
Okay. All right. So because life can exist at all, it's more likely under theism. How exactly do you quantify that?
Yeah, so, um, well, what I typically do is we just first we get the unconditional probability of life. At least like a very vague understanding of it. So, like life unconditionally is very unlikely, mainly because there's like an uncountably infinite parameter space, like basically set of possible worlds, and the subset of that in which the worlds allow for life is finite. The reason to believe that's true is because it seems like you can only stretch out the constant so far until they no longer allow for life, in either direction. So negatively or positively, insofar as the reals, and then that's just to imply it's finite. And if it's finite in contrast to this massive uncountably infinite set, then you just think that the amount of worlds in which there's life or allows for life is very small, thus thinking the probability, or the unconditional probability of these worlds is very low.
Hmm.
And then on theism, there's a being like a god who wants there to be life, like value-based reasons. Like you may value being able to share love with other agents, and thus would want to create worlds in which there's life. So privilege worlds of life And then that means that when you distribute the probability over all the worlds there, the ones with life, the ones that can have life, have a higher probability because the god would privilege those worlds. But then on the competitors, it's less clear to whether that's true. It seems more clear that it's either equals and everything gets the same probability, which isn't too great if the space is very large and the subset of worlds in which life is very small, or just completely does not privilege life in a way in which the worlds with life or the worlds that can have life have a lower probability. That's basically it.
Okay, well, so first off, I don't really know that the constants could be any other way. So I'm not one to go out on a limb and start trying to posit that I know why they are the way that they are and if they could have been different. If they couldn't have been different, then it seems like it would just be necessary that these constants would be the way that they are. But under bare theism, as far as talking about theism being expecting of life, under bare theism, it does not predict that God would want to produce life. So you would be positing something that could set the constants in such a way that life could come about, and then you would also assign the intention. And it's like, yeah, I mean, if you got like this like a murder mystery, for instance, and somebody wants to know who did the crime, you could say that the butler did it, because the butler's like, you're describing him and he's really good at doing murders and stuff, and he gets away with it all the time, and he covers his tracks perfectly, and he can make it look like natural causes. And what you see is apparently somebody died seemingly of natural causes. So it must have been the butler because he fits the bill better than any other description. But it's because he's defined in such a way that he's supposed to be the perfect one. That there is no butler, right? The butler in this scenario doesn't actually exist. Somebody's positing it as a perfect solution, but to demonstrate that it exists is another story. So I think that's kind of the thing that we have with God. People will define a seemingly perfect solution to this big question that we have, that of God, like something that could do it and has the desire to do it. Like, yeah, if there is that thing, then that would make sense. But demonstrating the thing is actually pretty important. But I do have a question. Do you think that God is omnipotent? He's maybe not omnipotent, but maximally powerful. He can do anything that's logically possible.
Well, I think it's omnipotent, but I wouldn't define it that way. I think omnipotence is just the ability to enact all of the things you freely will, right? So not all action types. Sorry, that's what I think omnipotence is. But can I respond to the three things you said before?
He can do anything he freely wills. That's what you think. That's what you
can enact anything he freely wills. Yeah, anything he freely wills. Yeah.
Because I mean. But if somebody can do anything they freely will, then anybody would be omnipotent. I mean, I don't believe in free will, but assuming I did, if I have free will and I can do whatever I will to do, then I'm omnipotent.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have free will, but if you had free will, you can enact anything you wanted to do, then yeah, you would be omnipotent. But that wouldn't really matter, would it? Because in this world, none of these humans are omnipotent because they have free will. But
so the reason I ask is because if God is all powerful, God, do you think that I think that if God is all powerful and God decides what the constants are and what the ramifications of these constants are, God in His omnipotence could make a life permitting universe under any set of constants, because
that's a contradiction, is it not?
How? Where is it?
Well, yeah, because the way we think of these laws formally are what we call universal instantiations, and that's just basically saying that the way they're expressed is in the form of for all things. If this thing is true of this thing, then the other thing is also true of that thing. And when we collate all these statements together, they actually force out another statement, which is that this thing could either exist or can't exist. Because of what's possible given these things. And suppose these words are hostile to life, implying these constants together force out the statement life can't exist. Then if life was to exist because God created it, that would be a straightforward contradiction. So that's the first thing. But you mentioned 3 things earlier that I wanted to respond to. I mean, should I leave them out or?
Go ahead. I didn't really understand your response to what you just said, but you can go
Oh
ahead.
yeah,
It's
I
totally
can
okay.
reiterate the response, and then if that's okay with you, I would like to respond to the other stuff as well.
Yeah.
So like suppose like there's like a collection of statements, right, that we affirm to be true, and these statements together entail, let's say, A, right, and then obviously couldn't be true that negation A is also true in the same sense, in the same time, all these things, but then God creates negation A. That's just an A. That's just like A and not A. That's a contradiction, no?
What in what I posited is the
Mm.
A and not A?
Well, yeah. So the A in question is what's entailed by the constants. So the constants together, given the way you express them formally, they entail another statement, right? Do you agree with that? So for like constants, because they're statements like how strong something is, that entails other things. You agree like these statements together entail something else, right? Seems
So
fairly
like I mean,
trivial.
if you mean like by right of us calling them constants because they're constant because like they don't seem to change, is that what you're talking about? But then making them different, is that kind of
Well,
what
it's
you're
not to do
trying
with
to?
whether they're constants, to do with whether they're just truth out statements. But I mean, yeah, yeah, I mean,
Because I mean, we just call them constants because they are constant, right? Like if they change, then we wouldn't call it a constant.
yeah,
Um,
I agree. That's why you call them constants. But I'm just saying, like the operative thing here is that they are actually just statements. They evaluate as true or false. But yeah, of course they're constants because supposedly they don't change. I mean that doesn't need to be assumed. But yeah, but I'm saying, do you agree that these statements slash constants they entail other statements being true? Because if the world doesn't permit for life, at least if it's neurologically impossible for life to exist, that's just to imply that these constants, when put in a conjunction, and they all evaluate as true, they also entail the statement that life can't exist.
well, so here's the thing: like if God is the one who's setting the constants, it seems like He would dictate what is nomologically possible.
Oh, so that's different from the prior thing, though. The prior thing was saying, well, there can be worlds in which the constants entail life can't exist, but then God just creates it because it's not beholden to His laws. But then what you're saying now is that, well, God can just configure the constants in a way in which they don't actually entail the statement that life can't exist. That those are two different things. Because in the first one, it does entail that. In the second one, it doesn't.
You're speaking pretty fast. I'm having a
Oh,
hard time
sorry.
keeping up.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to point out I wanted to point out the difference in your initial critique and this new one. What you're saying now, and tell me if I'm straw manning, tell me if I'm wrong. What you're saying now is that because God's all powerful, God could change the constants up such that they don't until life can't exist. Right? Is that correct?
So what I was saying is that like the
Mm-hmm.
way that I understand God and being omnipotent is God could make a world if God wanted to do a thing as long as it's logically possible then he could do it. So if he wanted to
Yeah.
make life possible in a universe with X constants and whatever X is it could represent anything um then he
Mm-hmm.
could. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I agree with that, of course, but what it sounds like to me is that the initial critique was that for any world, no matter whether it's nomologically, well, yeah, no matter whether it's like naturally or physically possible for life to exist, God could still put life there because He's not beholden to these laws. Do you agree with that? Yeah, I mean, is that what you
Like
were saying
yeah, I
initially?
mean God could make if God is uh is like maximally powerful, if he's this
Mm-hmm.
omnipotent thing, then yeah, no matter what the constants are, God could make whatever scenario we're talking about suitable for life. It might not be the same kind of life, or I guess maybe it even could be if he's changing what if he could decide what is nomologically possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, I understand that, but that's not the same as now saying, well, because God's so powerful, God could just set up a world in which these physical laws do entail that life can exist. So notice the difference here. In the first one, we're saying the statements entail that life can't exist, but because God's all powerful, He's maximally powerful, God can create life no matter whether it entails it or not. But then in the second one, you're saying, well, God's just changing, or God's just creating worlds in which the constants do entail life can exist, and thereby creating life. But that's different because on the first one, it's true that in these worlds life can't exist, but God still makes it nonetheless. But the second one, you're saying, well, it's until that life can exist, and then it seems natural that God would create
Well,
life there, or at least God
here's the
can
thing,
do.
like if it's so I wouldn't say that if life can't exist, then God can make it happen because that would be like an actual logical contradiction
Yeah,
if it
but
can't.
that's what's being posted though.
No, I was
But
talking
you're
about
saying,
something nomological.
Oh, you
That's
know,
the
see, I agree, but I'm saying, well, the contradiction here that I'm seeing is that it's both nomologically impossible life exists and also nomologically possible. Because if life exists, it seems like it's nomologically possible that life exists then, right? That's how we infer that's fine tuning. If life exists, it's because, you know, if we're here, then surely it's physically possible that we're here, right? But then, if you're saying God isn't beholden to these physical laws and nomological laws such that God could create life in modes in which they don't allow for life, that's just implying that it's nomologically impossible, but also nomologically possible, given the way we follow nomological possibility in this world, right? Does that make sense?
I don't know. That was kind of rapid fire
Okay.
again. I think what you're saying. Let me just see if I can repeat it back. So
Mm.
you're saying that like if God can make a world where it is nomologically possible for life, and you're saying that that's kind of how ours is described, right? And then your critique, I think, is I'm saying that he could make a world where it is nomologically impossible for life, but then make it so regardless.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm getting. That's what I'm getting at. I think so. I kind of missed the first part, but the second part I agree with. That's certainly part of what I'm saying. Yeah. Mm.
I'm just saying that like he can make it so that it's nomologically possible regardless of the constants. Like if constant is set to x and another constant is set to x, or y or whatever, like you could put them set to
Well,
any
that would
value.
straightforward be that would be a
Um,
contradiction
you could
then.
set them to any
Wait, that
value.
doesn't.
You could set them to any value, and God could say that the result of this is going to be that it is nomologically possible because he decides what the constants do and how they interact.
Okay, I just want to quote something and tell me if maybe you misspoke. You said that, you know, God can make something nomologically possible no matter what the constants are. But it's clear to me that what makes something nomologically possible could be God, but it's really dictated by the constants that God sets. So then it just is trivially isn't true. It isn't logically possible for, you know, something to be nomologically possible, completely divorced from the constants, because it's the constants that set whether it's nomologically possible or not. This is like this. By the way, what you said, by the way, just permits the statement that it's true that something's nomologically impossible, but then God sets it to be nomologically possible despite those laws, and that be true simultaneously, right? That's obviously that's what I'm getting at. I think that's
No, what
not
I'm saying is
logically
like he
possible.
could have said like what I'm saying is like he could have set the constants in such a way that they're like identical to ours, and said that the constants being set to this will make it so that life is nomologically impossible because the ramifications of the constants being set the way that they are would be dictated by God.
I mean, here's one thing I can say. So there's a few routes. Either it's true that you're saying God can make life exist and be nomologically possible no matter what, even divorced from a constant, or you're not saying that. If you're saying the first thing, then that's just going to lead to a contradiction that I've laid out. If you're saying the second thing, that's all I'm saying.
What I'm saying
That's
what I'm
compatible
saying is that
with the
God could
point
make the constants. Uh, Let me see if I can make it really clear. What I'm saying is that God could make the constants anything and make it so that it is nomologically possible. Like if life exists, then it's nomologically possible. It's not that
Do you think God can
it's
make?
nomologically impossible, but it exists anyway. I'm saying that
Do you
like
think
he
God?
could make it so that any configuration of the constants could result
Mm,
in it being nomologically possible.
okay, this might be the litmus test that I need here. So, do you think God can make the constants such that they're hostile to life, and then also make it true simultaneously that life's nomologically possible?
Make it so that the constants are hostile to life, and
Yeah,
make it
that
and simultaneously make it
possible.
so that it's impossible.
No, no, no. Simultaneously make it such that it's nomologically possible. So, like
Oh,
making the constants hostile, then making the nomological constants permit life
I
existing.
mean,
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of what we see now. The constants are kind of hostile to life because the universe is, it's almost seems like it's fine tuned to keep life from
But that's not what I
appearing.
mean by hostile. Hostile means there'll be no life. If there's some life and it's not hostile the
Oh,
way I define the term.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that
Yeah.
that's I might have been equivocating on hostile then. So like, I mean, because you could like, I could be hostile to my brother and push him, but I'm not like negating
Yeah.
his existence. So that's so like you're making okay. So yeah, I mean that would be a contradiction. If that's what you
Yeah,
mean.
yeah,
If it
but
makes it impossible, like if it's impossible, then that's a contradiction.
yeah, so it shouldn't be expected that God would do that. So then all you're committed to, all you can be committed to, is the following statement, which is that for all worlds in which life exists, God set these worlds up such that the constants permit life's existence. So God couldn't just make life in any world, no matter the constants. God needs to set the constants to permit for life. So that's the first thing. But then, okay, do we agree with that? Before I want to talk about
God needs to set the constants to. So God would need the constants in order to
Well, God
allow
doesn't
for
need them. They have to set them that way because there'll be an inconsistency. But we should maybe we should clarify what the constant's supposed to be, because I take a very deflationist account. I think the constants are just statements we infer from regularity about nature, like a very human account. Do you agree with that? Like the constants about the
I think so. Think so.
Yeah, that's it's more reasonable. So then, what is God exactly setting? I mean, I think God's just setting something, to do with the way processes work and such that collate together to form these statements that we infer, right? So the statements don't actually exist. Like God's not actually tweaking something, at least the statements. Sorry, but God's tweaking something that isn't identical to the statements. I should really say, right? So if that's true, then we shouldn't think that if it's also true that God is omnipotent in the way we've defined it, then God would create worlds in which they're hostile to life and there'd be life. Which was what I thought you were getting at initially.
No.
If you're not getting at that,
no.
Oh yeah, if you're not getting at that, then that's fine. Because I can accept that and fine-tuning still succeed. So that's fine. But you made 3 other points earlier. If am I okay to move on, or do you want to respond, sir?
No, go ahead with your... Yeah, that's fine. You can go ahead with your point, or what you want to respond to.
Yeah, you made 3 other points, and I might need a refresher. I think the first one was, I'm not convinced that the constants could be different. I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think you're saying, I'm not convinced there's possible worlds distinct from ours where the constants are not the same as ours, right?
Right. I don't know if the constants are the way that they are because it necessarily has to be that way. Well, I mean, I based on the world that I live in and kind of what I've gleaned, I am kind of a necessitarian, so that's kind of not true. But that's as it stands right now. I don't know that they could have been any different.
Look, I'll grant necessitarianism is true. I don't mind doing that. Okay. But all I don't need it to be metaphysically possible that the constants are different. That seems too much. All I need is that it's epistemically a priori possible that these constants are different, which simply put just means that through ideal reasoning, I can think about a world in which the constants are different and there be no contradiction, right? That's all I need. And then we can populate what we call the sample space with many different possible outcomes. And that's what the fine tuner really needs. All they need is a large enough space or a parameter space, and then some of that allow for life.
Right, but when we're talking about a possible world, we're really just doing a hypothetical. We don't know that these possible worlds, when we're thinking in this way, are actual or could be actual. You know what I mean? Because something is logically possible, I don't think that means that it just is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I agree.
I'm talking about our instantiation of the universe.
Yeah, I think you're talking about metaphysical possibility. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't seem clear to me whether. Yeah, it's not clear to me whether epistemic possibility in general is a good guide to metaphysical possibility. I agree with you there. But the way probability works is such that that's all we really need. And just to reject that or to contest that would undermine many inductions using sciences because they use probability in the same way. I mean, and to elucidate the absurdity here, if you were to reject, of course, just make sure we're clear. If you were to think that necessarianism is true, and that's just to imply there's no other possible, at least no other distinct metaphysically possible world, which is true in necessarianism, then, and that's supposed to imply, there's variance is necessary. That means you couldn't render evidence for abiogenesis, couldn't render evidence for the Big Bang, because there's only one universe apparently, and that's supposed to be reason to believe you couldn't render evidence for.
I don't know how that follows. How could you not render evidence for these things if necessarianism is true?
Well, I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying if you think necessarianism being true is a defeater to fine tuning because there's only one possible world or only one metaphysical possible world, they should think that other types of hypotheses that conditionalize on let's say you conditionalize on a larger space of there being like sorry, hypothesis that assume there's like many other worlds in some really really thin sense. Those ones would also not be able to work either for the same reason why fine tuning wouldn't be able to
Well,
work.
okay, so I think that there might be a little bit of a misunderstanding. Like, I'm not saying that
Mhm.
I'm like because I'm a necessitarian that I think the laws need to be constant. That's not what I'm saying. That was just
Mhm.
kind of like a one-off comment. The
Oh,
reason
okay.
the reason is because like when I think about the reason the constants are the way that they are, I don't know if that is something that is I don't know if it was so let me think of a good way to put it. I don't know that there could have been a way for them to actualize in a in a different kind of way. I don't know what
Yeah.
restraints they're under. I don't know what causes constants to be constants or the forces they have to be what they are. So
Mhm.
because I don't know what that is, it could just be nomologically impossible for any other instantiation of constants to exist for all I know, right? Um, and if they
Well,
change, if they are able to change, and we just aren't able to detect their change because maybe they change over a vast period of time, like if you have infinite time, for instance, or like one model of the universe that's not like a proven thing, but it's gaining popularity in physics is like the cyclical nature of the Big Bangs and Crunches model. Um,
mhm.
this like is implying infinite time, and so to speak. So if you have constants that do change, but if there's infinite time for them to change, I
It'll
think
eventually come
we
back to being the same.
right there would be like a there would have to be a time where the constants just allow for life.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I agree with all that. Yeah, maybe I'm being like too. Yeah, maybe I'm going a little bit too overboard because I agree with all that, and all we need to really agree with for this point is that I can create a space of worlds in which if the amount of worlds is more than one, and the modality of those worlds is just the epistemic modality. So like through ideal reasoning, I can infer that these different worlds, these conceptual worlds, aren't contradictory. So long as you get that, you can continue the argument because all we need is basically to show that there's many many worlds, and then the amount of worlds in which life exists is much smaller than that. So the unconditional probability is really low, and then the probability of the worlds in which there's life is higher if God was to exist. That's all. So I can agree with everything you said so far, and also, render the fine-tuning argument in a way in which it succeeds. So I don't mind accepting all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think right. So yeah, I the fine tuning argument for me, I think that it's sort of like a what's an example I can give here? It seems like somebody is seeing a phenomenon, and it is unlikely, right? When we look out in the cosmos, life is pretty rare. But we
Mm-hmm.
also have a lot of, for lack of a better word, attempts or like chances for life to exist. Uh, like life is not possible under these constants if you don't have the right conditions. There's a very, very small sliver of um, of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like there is very specific niche that the conditions need to be in. That's the word I was looking for. The
Yeah.
conditions need to be even under these constants for it to happen. You need the universe to be cooled off enough for planets to form, and you need these planets to be at a certain distance away from their star, and there has to be
Yeah.
a whole bunch of other things. So even under these constants, like I could think of constants that could make life more likely than they are now. Perhaps, or I could at least like suppose that that's a possibility if like these hypothetical constants could exist that like God could have made. Like God could have made a world where life is like 10 times more common to
Plentiful.
find.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and so because the universe allows life, but life is very like it seems like life is tenuous and is just kind of fighting against the odds. It almost seems like
Mm-hmm.
we live in a universe where if there's a God, it's almost like he's not quite a perfect
Kind of
God,
against us, right?
but he's kind of making a
Yeah.
universe where he doesn't want life to exist, and he's doing everything he can to like make it so that it can't and prevent it. Um, that's just kind of how it seems. Like
Yeah.
if you've got like an ice cream machine that emits well over 99% toxic waste, and sometimes after a few billion years you get like a teeny little dot of ice cream. I mean
Hmm.
that doesn't it's not compelling to me that this is designed to make
Yeah.
ice cream.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually, I actually have like very similar intuitions. I think like the empirics, seem to suggest like, if a god does exist, like a god doesn't really want us to exist. But bear in mind, if God's so powerful and didn't want us to exist, there'd be no struggle. Of course, the struggle here is still quite surprising, but there'd be no struggle at all. He'll just wipe
Hmm.
us out instantly. He can do it real easily.
Yeah, if God's
Um,
all powerful. Now that's why I said like the God wouldn't be all powerful in this one because he would be making an imperfect creation. Like if
yeah.
God's all
Mhm.
powerful and he's the creator, then however the world is exactly how he wanted it to be, down to the smallest
Mhm.
little detail.
Well, bear in mind what fine tuning does, because fine tuning is like really, really. I guess we can call it really bad, right? All fine tuning is doing is conditionalizing on a very, very minimal statement, which is that life exists. It doesn't mention the magnitude, doesn't mention the quality.
Hmm.
We
But
could be living in.
could
Mhm.
I just like ask
Yeah.
like, why is it expected under theism that like, if God exists, he would want to create life?
Oh, I mean, yeah. So first, well, I should clarify. Like, this like, might be like a slight mistake here, but correct me if I'm wrong. If you're asking me why I think that conditional on theism, God would want to create life, that's just asking me, okay, how have you defined God such that it's analytically true that God's going to want life? Because that's all we really do in these arguments. We just we just give reasons, like stories as to why God would want these particular things or explanations, and that's like what I guess motivates the probability of the evidence conditional on the hypothesis. So if you're just asking that, then the answer would be well, because God's defined as a being that's all powerful, or knowing, or loving, all good, and being all good means you want to, or being all loving, sorry, means you want to share your love with other beings. And, in order for that to happen, you need other beings, right? Um, so that's one reason to believe that would be true. There's many reasons to believe that God would want life. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it does depend on how you define God, and I don't know that like if God exists, I certainly wouldn't say that it's an all loving God. Because I mean, this is kind of like if God is all powerful and all knowing, then God would not
Mhm.
be all loving because then he would stop all gratuitous suffering. I think that would just follow.
Well,
You know
that's
what I
not
mean?
true. It's not possible to suffer good to suffering. Because God's unique, right? And if God's unique and all good, then all the beings all good. And bear in mind, like, all good just means that you conduct only good actions or you conduct only evil actions. If no other beings all good, then those beings that conduct at least one not good action. So actually, there being no good action to follow on theism. It's actually expected. The magnitude, I can see it's not exactly expected, but there being evil simpliciter, that's expected. In fact, it follows from theism. At least classical
I
theism, I
mean,
should
so
say.
like because if you've got love. We could only really
Mhm.
understand love by the way that we communicate it to each other. If God
Yeah.
has a mysterious idea of what love is, we don't have access to that. People can like claim to know what that is or have an idea. Um, but we can all kind of agree generally on what love is and what an act of love would be and what an act that it has is devoid of love would look like. Like if you've got if you're here's a common example you've probably heard before. If you're standing on the side of a pool and there's a puppy drowning and you have the long fishing net to like get the leaves out the pool and you just stand there for minutes and watch the puppy die, I would say that that's like
Mhm.
a very cruel thing to do. Like that's like you
Yeah.
were not acting in love. You could save the life of the puppy, but you just
Mhm.
decide to watch instead. And this is what we see God like anytime anything bad happens, you would be committed to saying that it is loving for God to watch this happen and not help.
Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not like rendering, and I think the theodicies that do that, I think that they're not that great. But I'm not rendering a theodicy where I say we explain away all evil because evil exists because God, it produces these things that God loves. No, nothing like that. I'm saying straightforwardly, like given that in classical theism, God's unique, and God's all good, no other beings all good. And it falls from that being true that all the beings that can conduct evil actions, like moral agents, will do at least one not good action. That's what predicts that. But then to respond to the hypothetical, I agree the person who lets it drown is evil. And they're not loving either, right? But that's because, and it seems clear to me that that's because they have the access to get them out the pool at no expense to themselves. They can just put the rod in, get them out, everything's done.
Yeah.
But for God, given my prior argument, it's actually not possible to stop evil. That's not to imply God's not all powerful, because bear in mind being all powerful ranges over things that are logically possible. It just follows from what God is that there is going to be some evil, right?
I think that if it follows from what God is, that there's going to be some evil, I think that would eliminate the all-loving factor, or it would restrict the all-powerful factor. If there's something that God can't do, and I'm not going to like include logical fallacies or logical contradictions. I mean, in this, we'll just say, like, aside from that, if there's something he can't do, then he's not all-powerful. And if there's something that he restricts himself from doing, or he could do a loving act, but decides not to, then that would make him not all loving. I think these things are just in contradiction with one another. Now, you can define God in certain ways, and you can reason and hypothesize if this is the God that we're thinking of, what will we expect. But to confirm that these are actually attributes of God, I think that a God that's all powerful, or a God that is powerful enough to create the universe, rather, and not necessarily all loving, that seems like more what the evidence would suggest from where I'm standing over here. I'm wondering how, if you posit a God that's all powerful, all knowing, and all loving, how you could even ever verify that that's the case.
Yeah, that's a radically different question. I think that finally a fine tuning might give reasons to believe that's true. But to respond to the all-loving and all-powerful seeming inconsistency, I think the hypothetical we gave was, well, the example we gave was great. Yeah, the person there is evil or not loving because they could literally get the puppy out. Suppose they're on the other side of the planet, but they know the puppy's in there and they're running. Like, they're not unloving. They're not, not loving because they didn't get there. It's just
they're just not all powerful, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But that's an analog. I'm not saying God's not powerful. I'm saying it's just not possible, because it's a contradiction. Now I'll explain why it's a contradiction, right? And bearing in mind, this thing is a contradiction if, it tells A and not A. So, given classical theism, I should say, God is unique, and God's all good. And that implies that no other beings are good. And if no other beings are good, then they conduct at least one good action. So it follows from that there's evils. Now, given God's also necessary, and absolute divine simplicity is true, and God has a will, God's identical to his will. So his will is also necessary. So his will for all worlds is the same. So for all worlds, God creates agents, and for all worlds, given his essence, he's also unique and all good. So the same thing follows for all worlds. So for all worlds, there is evil. So for you to ask, okay, why wouldn't God just create a world in which there's no evil, is to ask, why wouldn't God create a world that's not possible? Because the space of possible worlds, the modal space, at least where theism is true, is such that only worlds in which evil exists because God exists are the ones that arise. It's not to imply they're all evil.
So okay. So God, God. God is simple. His will is identical to himself. He can't act outside of his will because he can't act outside of himself. He is himself. Right? There would be a contradiction there. But that just means that seems like
what's the
God.
PM up here?
No, I was agreeing with you. Like you said, like he's not acting.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was
That's
agreeing with what you said. Yeah. So, but that just makes it seem like God has just as little free will as we do. It almost seems like he's more of a force of nature. He's not really able to control what he does. He just exists and necessarily does the only thing he can do. No matter what. Almost like I don't know that God would even be personal at this point, because God wouldn't really be a thinking agent. God would just be this like nebulous idea.
Surely lacking free will wouldn't. Surely lacking free will wouldn't mean you're not an agent, because determinists can easily say that agents are thinking, and there are agents, right?
Right, but I mean, like in a metaphysical sense. Like I'm not talking about from a pragmatic standpoint where we would say like I'm an agent, because like I said, I don't believe in free will. I don't think that God has free will, like libertarian free will either. But if
Wait, you
God's
think
supposed
you're an
to,
agent in the real sense, like in the metaphysical sense?
no, I
Like,
don't think I'm an agent in the
okay,
metaphysical sense. I think I'm an agent in the pragmatic sense.
okay.
Yeah,
All
like for
right, that's
my
fair enough.
yeah, the way I navigate life, and I don't. I mean, it seems like God wouldn't. I don't know that God would be an agent in either sense. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like it feels like he
Yeah, I think
wouldn't even
most
have
men
the
be an
capacity
agent.
to think.
Yeah, I mean, the reason to believe he's an agent in light of all this is the following. So I agree for all worlds, actions the same. And that seems quite restrictive, but that's only restrictive if it's not by his choice. Now, bear in mind the deciding factor here is his will. His will is what everything's beholden to, so of course he has free will. It's his will doing the talking. It's not some other antecedent making him do these things. It's not being determined by some other thing. It's just his will. So of course, he has the free will in that aspect. But once again, I do acknowledge the intuition because for all worlds as well as the same. That seems quite weird. But I mean, if it's down to his will, surely that's to imply it's free. It's like no antecedent restricting it. Yeah.
Well, his will can't be different, and he doesn't decide his will is what makes
Well,
it not
it can.
free.
It's
Well,
counterpossible.
if he can decide his will, but it can't be any different, then he seems like he can choose all one of the options. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, he just chooses to do so across all worlds, right? And
Yeah,
that's what
like
makes it
I'll give
necessary.
you a choice between choice A or
Mm.
no other choices. Like you have to choose
Well, I
choice
mean,
A, and you can I can freely choose choice A.
yeah.
It seems like that's what God's doing. Like
Mm.
you have one option, choose from all of the option, and that's what he's doing.
And God just loves A so much. God loves A so much he does it in all worlds. I once again, I agree with your intuition. It's real weird. It doesn't seem like it's free, but just given the way free was defined, it's just trivially it's free, right? So I agree with the intuition, but no, it's free given the way free was defined. But yeah,
Hey,
mhm.
I do wanna move on, and we've been talking for almost 40 minutes. Have we talked before? I
Yeah,
recognize your PFP.
I think we have. Yeah, I think you spoke about some other argument. Yeah,
I think when I was on my phone one time before work, we talked. Yeah, I
yeah.
recognize your PFP. You're a pretty fucking smart guy. I like talking to you.
Same with you. It was
Yeah,
nice talking to you, man.
you just need to talk slower, I
Yeah,
think.
I'm sorry about that.
You know?
I hear it all the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
gotta work on that.
yeah. All right, Hodge, you have a good night, man.
You too, man. Have a great day.
Yeah. Can we get W's in the chat for Hodge? Really intelligent guy. It feels like he's kind of I don't think that he's just some moron who is necessarily indoctrinated. It feels like he's really thought this stuff through. But I think where I found my problems with what he's saying, I think that they're very reasonable. It seems like he understands where I'm coming from too, as he says. He agrees with the intuition. I'm gonna bring up, screw it. I'll bring up Godless, and I'll bring up this other person here, Interstellar Vessel, and we can talk to them. Just a minute here. I'm gonna grab myself a beer.
Well, Lubes is getting a beer. Yeah, Lubes is getting a beer right here. Didn't you hear that boy Lubes is getting himself a note of beer? Yeah, so you should get one too. I said it's beer time. Yeah, it's beer time. Whoa. Flippity flappity flapping door below, below, below. Bitch. What kind you get? Ooh, that shit looks good. Yeah, baby, yo. Bitch.
What's up, Godless? How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I haven't been as active on TikTok lately, and I think I'm going to try to get more active again.
Yeah, well, good, man. Yeah, I haven't seen you in a while. Dude, my viewership is insane today, so
I
I don't know
saw
if you
that, and then
earlier.
all of a sudden I started talking and showing up in the chat, and then your viewership declined like usual. I have that
Yeah, well,
effect.
I did have a bot raid. There was tons of bots in here earlier. And so I think a lot of them, well, yeah, the majority of them were that. But then when it got down to kind of like where it was more normal numbers. I was like, is this real or not? And now I'm down here, so I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but I think that we're safe from the bots at this point. But it is kind of
I didn't even
disappointing
know
that
that
it's
was a
all the way
thing
down in the
anymore.
30s. Yeah, I mean, it was happening to Mezzo tonight. He was like over 1K for most of the evening. I think he might still be
What
live. Happened to
you would think
Yodi.
that would
Happened to Ogar.
would that support you though? Wouldn't that like
I don't know what
push the
it does
algorithm
to
and get you out there?
I don't know what it does to the algorithm, but truthfully. But hey, we got a
Yeah.
guest here. Hey, Jet Set Ranks. Are you at least 18?
Yes. Yeah, I am.
Okay. What prompt do you want to engage with?
Uh, God is evil. Just wanted to know probably
Okay.
that one.
Okay. Well, what's your background? Do you believe in a specific God, or are we gonna just talk about God in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Muslim, so I believe in Allah. So
Okay. Are you able to do anything about the TV?
yeah, let me pause this. I bet that McGregor fight coming up.
Word. Okay. Yeah. So, admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about Islam. I think I have some pretty surface level knowledge about it. So I'm not going to be able to pull up like scripture and be like, hey, check out where Allah was like being a dick here or something like that. Like I could do that with the Bible, pretty easily. Um, but to my understanding, Allah is supposed to be another like triomni God where he's like all powerful, all knowing, and all loving. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, right. So um, I think therein lies a contradiction where I was talking with the last guest. We were talking about this issue. Um, if 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 I guess I can use the same example here. Like, would you say that if somebody is watching a puppy struggle to swim in a pool and they have the means to get them out with that long pool net to scoop them out and save the puppy's life, but they just watch them slowly drown, would you say that that's a loving person, or would you say that that's like an evil person?
Yeah, I'd agree. If they have the power to pull that puppy out and they don't, then yeah, that'd be evil for sure.
Yeah. So this is something that happens all the time. Puppies drown, but not just puppies, like people do. Um, Rocks fall on the legs of deer in the wild, and they just slowly die, and they don't know what's going on. Um, we have an ecosystem where we need to rip each other apart and eat each other in order to survive. Some of us. It feels like we live in a universe that is designed in such a way that increases gratuitous suffering for seemingly no reason. And I think that if there is no reason for it, it means it's unnecessary. If it's unnecessary, I think that it's unjustified, which would make the God that set up this system evil.
Yeah, I see your point there. And it's valid too, honestly, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think that way sometimes too. I think, why is all this evil going around the world? Why do, countries get bombed? Why are, people in Africa starving? Things like that. I think like that too, honestly. And I'll be honest with you, I'm no expert in this field. So that's what kind of why I joined. I just wanted to maybe learn a thing or two and just kind of get your take on things. As far as I know, everything happens for a reason. And, you know, this is the world we live in. It's like a good and evil.
Yeah, I think right. So I think that if you are the persuasion that everything happens for a reason, I think that follows. I think that's pretty consistent if your God is like all knowing and sets everything in motion. Like he would just dictate every outcome. So it would be like whatever world exists is exactly the way the first mover wanted it to be, right? With his perfect
Yeah.
foreknowledge, of course. So that means that um, for any time you have something gratuitously and seemingly to us unnecessarily terrible happen, like let's say like there's a child getting fucked or something like that, there would be a reason that Allah has to allow and actually necessitate that that child get fucked. I think I can't comprehend that. My own human understanding, which is all that I have, it's all I'm limited to, thinks there is no possible context in which that is justified. And if God is doing this just because he wants to, if his will is the end all be all, then it really feels like the child gets fucked just because God wanted the child to get fucked, and no deeper reason.
Yeah, that's really tough to argue with because I agree with you. It's like why are screwed up things like this allowed in the world? Uh, I don't have an answer, honestly, man. It's crazy, really.
I know that back in the days of when I was a huge hard time believer, I know that my answer would have been something along the lines of, uh, God does this so that we can learn to be more compassionate and allow suffering for compassion to exist. Or, but I mean, even that has its own,
Right. That's
problems.
because the problem with that is like if you were to take that stance, Jet Set Ranks, I mean, it's just like that's a situation where you are saying that evil and suffering, like gratuitous suffering specifically, are necessary for in order for like something like heroism or overcoming wickedness to exist. Like cancer exists so that we can defeat cancer. So God would be like causing a problem so that he could solve it, or he could watch us solve it, then take all the credit for it later once it's like taken lives senselessly, right? There's an episode of the Powerpuff Girls about this where there's this new hero that goes to Townsville, and he's like kicking dogs into the street, then like swooping in and saving them, and then, like nobody saw him kick the dog, and he's getting all this praise until they find out, and then they fucking hate him because he's just wreaking havoc so that he can get glory. He's like Syndrome from The Incredibles. That's a pretty good example. God would be Syndrome for having um, evil and gratuitous suffering existing just so that it can be overcome and we could have like quote unquote better goods. I think the best good is when there's no bad. I think that I think that's pretty like I think that's kind of like trivially obvious.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have something for you though, Lovis. So, pretty much, to my understanding, God made all of us with free will. So, but is it really like appropriate or just to say that like let's use that example. You use like children being raped every day. Is it fair to say that God directly allowed this to happen? I mean, he created us all with free will, so wouldn't
Right.
it be the human's fault or the person who did it's problem?
So there's right. So there's like a couple responses that I have to that. Like, I don't believe in free will. I think it's logically impossible. I don't think that even God has free will if God exists. But if I grant free will like simpliciter, then I would just be saying that it would follow that if God allows evil people to do evil things because of free will, and free will is really important, then what that tells me is that God just values an evildoer's free will to fuck a kid more than the safety and well-being and the free will of the victim. So like the free will of the kid is being violated, and that should be like on its own, regardless of if it's something gratuitous like being raped. Um, if their free will is being violated, then something should stop that, right? Like their autonomy should be preserved because free will is supposed to be important. But God in this instance, where the kid's getting fucked, he's got this dilemma in front of him: free will of the victim or free will of the oppressor, and he thinks that the free will of the oppressor is just more important. So he's going to allow the rapist to fuck the kid, and he doesn't care about the ramifications, because if he did, then he would stop it. If if he valued the safety of the child more than the free will of the assailant, then he would intervene. Like we don't. Like if somebody was raping a kid in front of me, I think you would have a huge problem with me if I was like, I care about the guy's free will. What are you gonna do? Sue me? Like, we gotta protect the bad guy's free will. He goes to court, I was just exercising my free will. Like, yeah, I did it, but free will. that does not fly with us. And God, I think we should hold not to our same standard, but to an infinitely greater standard if he's supposed to be the supreme, all powerful, all knowing, all good thing. Then if there's no excuse for us, there's certainly no excuse for God.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's a good point, bro. I mean, I gotta, hit the drawing board and, just kind of take a step back and see study up a bit more and see how, what's the answer to this question, what
Right.
solution I can come up with. So,
I
but,
think I think so when you do this, when you think about this, you ought, if you're trying to pursue truth, you ought wager your faith. I tell this to a lot of people, whoever I think is like genuinely open-minded and like a critical thinker, like I think that you value truth. I would just encourage you to wager your faith, because if you don't wager your faith, then like you are kind of restricting yourself, and it's kind of saying something to God. Like, I don't think that the facts and my pursuit of truth will lead me to you. I think that there's too great of a chance of you being proven wrong here, like that you're evil, or that you aren't real or something. You know what I mean? Um, and I think that would
yeah,
be insulting to God. It would certainly be insulting to like yourself, for you to do it yourself. So anytime you do your introspection or your research or what have you, if you come to a conclusion that you already wanted from the beginning, it doesn't mean that it's like necessarily wrong, but you should be extra critical over that and make sure you aren't implementing any confirmation bias anywhere along the line. Like, make sure you didn't get there because you wanted to, right? Now, you just have to accept the fact that you could, and like you would have to accept the real possibility that you would lose your faith entirely if you do this way. And that's, I think, people will say they're willing to do, but seldom are actually willing to do it. Like, they will like kid themselves about it. So I would like to encourage you to do that. And if you'd like, I don't think I have anybody else requesting. We could talk about free will. I've got a pretty strong opinion about that.
yeah, I'd love to. Do you mind if I ask? Oh, were you previously religious or anything, or
I was a Christian until I was 22.
Oh, okay, I
Hmm.
gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have any questions about that, or do you want to go into free will?
Uh, Honestly, man, you gave me a lot to think about, bro. I really just want to, just kind of do my own research right now on these things because I just want to, like, when people ask me these questions, I want to have like a stronger point, a stronger, side to things. But so, yeah, I think I appreciate your time today, man. I'm like I
Yeah.
said, I'm gonna hit the drawing board, and
Sure,
I'm
man.
gonna give you a follow
Yeah.
too, bro.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, hit the drawing board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. You sound a lot. You remind me of the way that you're saying you're thinking right now reminds me of how I was thinking right before I lost my faith. So that's it might be scary for you to hear me say that, but like it's very reassuring. But hey, man, if you ever do find yourself where you've like lost your faith, I understand it's especially difficult for Muslims when they lose their faith. It's apparently like especially frowned upon in that culture. So I don't know just how egregious it is depending on where you live. But if you find yourself to be an Islamic apostate one day, you can find refuge talking to me or oh, hang on, this stupid puzzle piece. You can find refuge talking to me or anybody in our like deconstruction community. I've got a Discord. You'd be welcome there to chill out and deal with deal with the ramifications of losing said faith with people who also have done the same thing. So you don't have to be alone if that happens. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, you too, man. Have a good one.
So about this free will thing, I'm kind of, I think it more on a spectrum of there's some things that are free will, some things we have free will about, some things we don't. Like I can choose to move my hand right or left at any, decide, and that's a free will aspect. But then there's other things that I'm influenced by on in the natural world around me that, that kind of defeats free will. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think that you have free will at all. I think that you're exercising your will when you move your hand around, but it's not a free will. Like I just moved my hand around as an example. But that was not my free will causing me to do that. I did it because I wanted to do a demonstration, and I wanted to give that demonstration because we're talking about free will, and we're talking about free will because I brought it up earlier, and then because I brought it up, uh, you brought it up, and now we're talking about,
Gotcha.
you know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
this is like a causal chain that causes things to happen that we aren't in control of, down to like the synapses firing in your mind. There's like a biological component. You don't get to choose what parents you're born to, what time period you're born in, what geographic location you're born in, what things taste good to you, what moves you, what music you like. You don't get to choose any of these things. You don't get to choose the people you meet. You don't get to choose how you feel about them. Like there's a saying like if I were you, I would have done this, but truthfully, like if you were me, you would have all of my priors and you would be the exact same person down to the smallest detail. Um,
So this kind of logic, this line of logic, like it I can see it going towards the point where I'm going to move my hand. Okay, I can see the point, like, because there's a causal change that caused me to decide to move my hand. But once my hand is up in the air, at that point in time, whether I decide to move it left or right is on me, right?
I mean, I would say that you will do it as long as you want to do it, but you don't get to decide what you want. Like you can do what you will, but you cannot will what you will. Do you understand like what I mean when I say that?
Okay, that's you got me on a deep thinking. All right, this is fantastic. Good
Yeah.
deal. Good, yeah, I
Like
like this stuff.
you can do whatever you want, and like that's what a lot of people are talking about from a surface level when they're talking about free will. But when we're talking about libertarian free will, which is what people are really arguing in philosophy, is like being able to like have your will completely unbridled from any external factors. So, but your will is always influenced by external factors. You can't like when I said you can do what you will, but you cannot will what you will. That's just 100% true. You don't get to choose what you want. You can do whatever you want, but you can't choose what you want. And whatever it is you want, you're a slave to doing. Even if you were like, you know what, I wanna eat chocolate ice cream because it's my favorite, and I also have vanilla in the fridge, but I want chocolate. I'm gonna exercise my free will and choose the one I don't want. Well, there's still no free will there. You simply had a competing want that outweighed the natural want of wanting to eat your favorite ice cream. You wanted to exercise your alleged free will more than you wanted to have your favorite flavor of ice cream. People will say I have free will because um, I don't want to go to the gym and get gains, but I do go to the gym and get gains, despite not really wanting to. But really, you just value discipline and gains more than being lazy. You value your dignity more. You value your exercise more than giving into your natural maybe sloth that might seem like you want to do it the most. Um,
See now,
whatever you want to do the most, you will do. Aside from like an accident, which is not your will, or like force or coercion from an outside party, which is also not your will. Whatever you want to do the most, you just will do, and you don't get to choose what that want is.
so if I like, okay, I there's a bit of a darker turn, I guess, here in the fact that years and years and years ago, I was uh, an addict. I was an addict to crystal meth for like several years, and I got out of that back in 2012. And since then, I've been, good. My life's been great. Everything's been fine, or whatever. But the addiction is still there. It's still the thing that I would want to do the most, but I don't do it because I've got a lot of things going for me. Don't want to run my life or anything of that nature. But what this tells me is that because there is no free will, it could lead me to fear that what if something happens one day in the future that leads me to doing it again against my will? I don't know if I'm coming across right the way I'm asking that.
Yeah, it's so when people come to terms with the fact that they don't have free will, some people take it in stride. Like I do, I was kind of unbothered by it. It was like a whoa, that's crazy kind of thing for me, but it
Mm.
wasn't like a oh my God, I'm not even in control. Do I even have an identity? Some people have that, where they can't even deal with the fact that they don't have free will if it makes sense to them, and they're like, I wish I never learned this. Oh, hey, Jet Set wants to come back up. Um, I wonder if he was listening to this. Yeah, some people can't handle that. And it seems like you might be I think you'd be able to handle it, but it seems like it would probably give you some anxiety, right? Because
Yeah,
there would be,
that's what I was saying.
yeah. I think that
You think
you can't really hold yourself intrinsically at fault. You were always going to do what you were going to do, and that's why it's really important when people are, I guess I'm not a therapist or psychologist or anything, but when people are doing therapy, it's important to understand why the person that you're talking to thinks the way that they do, wants the things that they want. You want to get inside their mind and understand how it operates. You want to get like get get to the point of how they got to be where they are and make them aware of that so that they can take steps forward in a different way. And that would be you influencing their will in a way, because you would be implementing this thought, your insight to how someone else's mind worked, delivering that information to them will change the course of what they were, what they otherwise would have done. Of course, like that, even that interaction was always going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a lot of food for thought, man. I like this. I very much like this. I'm glad I came up here.
Yeah. Hey, Jet Set left. I was
Oh
just
my
about
goodness.
to. I was just about to ask his thoughts.
Hmm.
Let me see if there's
Um,
anybody else. Nobody else right now. Okay. Guys,
I use
we're
the
under.
same. I use this. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're under 40 people in here, so make sure you're spamming the shares and tapping the screen a lot. If you want, I do have like a gift goal. Sending gifts in the live helps boost it too. If you follow me, you can join the fan club if you haven't already by just sending the heart me that costs less than a penny. So yeah, definitely do some stuff. Let's help boost the stream and
I
push it
don't know
out
if
there
you
so
know
we can
this.
so we can get some opposition in here, have some good conversations.
I
That's
don't
why
know if
we're
you
all
know this,
sitting
but
here anyway.
I returned to the super fan status today.
Today, let's fucking go. I appreciate that,
It's a good
Godless.
sign that my life is getting better. That I'm able to finally go back to being a super fan to people. But
That's
yeah,
nice.
I use that same. I actually do use that same kind of logic when I talk to people about emotions because I have a friend who who he argues with me that some other people can be responsible for your emotions, and I don't believe other people are responsible for your emotions. You're responsible for your emotions. Other people are just responsible for how they reacted.
Okay, yeah. Hey,
And that kind of has
Voodoo Warrior AI Ben Guscat. I'll just call you Voodoo. How are you?
What's up? What's up?
What's up? Are you at least 18?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I spoke to you before.
Oh, word? How did it go?
I don't know, man. I don't think you're ready to be convinced about anything.
Oh, maybe not. Well, what prompt
Are
you
you?
with?
How's the magnesium deficiency coming along?
Oh, you're that guy.
No. I came after him. The guy was pretty funny actually.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Because that guy was pretty memorable. That was a really funny interaction. The guy was kind of a nut. But I don't remember what we talked about. Some posts are like really good and they take notes and stuff, like
Did you record?
Yogi and Ogar. Well, it would be on YouTube, but I don't remember because they're automatically posted. But I don't remember when that was, and I certainly don't know what timestamp it would be, even if I knew the day.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So
what do you want to talk about?
yeah, man. Like, wait, can you prove to me that you're willing to be convinced
I don't think I could
about God?
I don't think I could prove that to you, but like if you have a compelling argument, then I won't
Are
really have a
you?
choice. If I am a reasonable person, I won't have a choice but to like accept it if it is actually like logically sound.
So, like, when you say you're willing to accept evidence, right? I mean, is it because you're certain about the evidence, or is the evidence more likely, right? Something is true because it's more likely to be true. Do you accept that premise?
I don't. No, I don't think that that's. I mean, I think that that's a pretty good rule for certain like sciences, but I wouldn't say that just because something's more likely to be the case. That's like coming from a purview where we don't know what the case actually is, like based on
In the dichotomy,
yeah,
in a
right.
dichotomous proposition.
I mean, it's just sort of like a wager at that point. You know, if you've got like a six-sided die and you paint four of the sides red, it's like, will red roll? Like you would say, like, is it true that red will roll? It's like, maybe. You know, there's more reds on the faces of the die than like greens or something. Like if you paint the other two sides green, but that doesn't mean that it's definitely going to be red.
Yeah, because you always run into this issue of we don't know if
Yeah.
we don't know, right? The we don't know answer. So I mean that kind of tells me that certain things are unexplainable or
Right.
unknowable. Maybe
It's not like
is that your position?
yeah, well, I mean that's largely my position. I'm a pretty skeptical person, very skeptical of like all this religious shit. But yeah, like that would lead somebody to being like an agnostic atheist, where they don't really know. You know, they're like I don't know that enough to really put a stake in this, and that's like that is a branch of atheism. That's the person who doesn't know
Are
if there's a
you
God.
also skeptical about this position? That you're skeptical about the truth
Am I
of
skeptical about
religion?
the truth?
No, about like so. I mean, there's you can get stuck in infinite regress or infinite a circle of skepticism, and then nothing would make sense. So you have to establish like
I mean,
why is
like
anything true? What, if truth
well,
exists?
so I don't think that we have access to absolutes, if that's what you're asking. I
No,
take
that's what I'm
certain
saying. Like,
axioms. Like I take
yeah,
axioms
that's
for like pragmatism, and I move forward from there.
yeah. So like, do you accept truth exists?
Yeah.
Or it's more likely. Okay. Do you think truth about God exists?
I think so. Yeah, like truth like is like a judgment on like a propositional sense. So like if we posit like is God real? It's either true or not. And like if God is real, if we define him this way, then would it be true that he is that way? It's like yeah, of course, because we
Yeah.
will have like just defined him that way. So yeah, like
Yeah.
truth would apply to any concept that you want to like syllogize or talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Truths are knowable for sure. So 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 then if we define God as a classical theistic God where God has the capacity to communicate to mankind, it's not some sort of deistic God where has no capacity even to communicate. I mean, so in terms of pragmatic truths, like, wouldn't you agree that the theistic definition of God is is something you ought to pursue rather than a deistic definition of God? If pragmatism is one of your premises or one of your axioms that you accept.
I mean, like maybe like if it's like a between the two kind of thing, maybe I don't know. I don't know that we should necessarily pursue things like I don't feel like a need to pursue something like um a genie that can interact with us versus like a genie that doesn't like care that we exist, because obviously the genie's just like made up shit, and that's kind of how I feel about God. Like it's
I
made
mean,
up shit
that's
anyway.
yeah. You see, I have an issue with that kind of thinking because you're presupposing that genie is fictional and then concluding that genie is fictional. That's circular, right?
No, it's
I
like,
mean,
well, I've got no reason to believe that a genie exists. Just like I have no reason to believe that Russell's teapot exists, the teapot that orbits the sun. I'm not going to sit here and do all this investigation to rule it out. It's kind of like an absurd thing. I could posit a million dumb-sounding things out of my ass right now and just present them to you, and like obviously they should not warrant any investigation because I'm just making dumb shit up. Like a sandwich that exists on Pluto is one that I bring up sometimes. I'm gonna just say that yeah, of course I don't believe that exists, and no, I don't. I don't think that it's necessary for me to
I
go to
mean,
Pluto and check every crevice to just to see if there is or there isn't a sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the scope of the evidence and the claim around what the subject,
Right.
right? I mean, if the genie was something that was the cause for you getting stabbed every 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, you would ought to care about that genie, don't you?
Um, yeah, I mean, I would just be wondering how we would ever get to like a genie being responsible for it. It seems like a superstition would
It's a
probably cause somebody
hypothetical. No, 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 really, something you're getting
something
stabbed
stabbing you
every
at 9
9 a.m.
a.m. every morning, and somebody's like,
Yeah.
what if it's a genie? I better go rule that out. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, the hypothetical itself is the claim is that this genie is responsible, the cause of it. Wouldn't it, and you are experiencing that stabbing. So
Hmm.
wouldn't you want or ought to care about that proposition? So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just like that. It
right.
all
So,
depends
okay,
on the
okay, okay,
definition
okay.
of
So,
God.
just make sure I understand. Like, so you're saying that, like, in this hypothetical, there literally is a genie that's stabbing me every morning at 9 a.m. And I
Yeah, no,
should be like trying
literally.
to. See, like, the thing is,
Or
though, if that's the case, I wouldn't have any reason to like assume that a genie is a candidate option. I mean, because I I mean,
an efficient cause.
what could even get me to like supposing
Yeah,
that a genie could even be responsible over
yeah.
something like a
There's
9 a.m. stabbing fairy, like the fairies in folklore
there's a
that
book that
always
says
stab
it.
people. There's
Yeah,
like
there's a book that says it. Makes that
there's a book.
claim.
I mean, so like if there was another book that was called the 9 a.m. stabbing fairies, wouldn't that be like better evidence?
Yeah,
Like if somebody wrote like there's these fairies that always stab people at 9 in the morning all the time, and sometimes it's like one person, sometimes it's another person. If I discovered that, then I should look into that.
yeah, yeah. I would say that you would take your conclusions where you would take the data set and you would get into your conclusions if it leads you there. But yeah, you would put that on the table as a possible cause for the effect you're experiencing. So just like that, I mean, this is kind of just a hypothetical, but obviously, when we talk about definitions, like we ought to care about things that affect our existence, right? I mean, we care about where we came from, where are we going,
Hmm.
this basic utilitarian principles of like pleasure and harm. So if there is an entity that is making a strong claim about where you came from, where you will end up in the future, as a rational human being, I ought to care about that definition of God rather than a definition of God who is less than all powerful, or was a created entity, or is a fictional character, or is a deistic God. I
So
mean, it just makes sense, right?
what kind of things would I be like even looking for then? Like, so what's a good argument that you might have to suggest that this thing is actually real? Because it seems like it's just like a thing of fiction that people have made up for various reasons, whether it's cope or power sometimes, or like just tradition.
So, I mean, do you concede that anything that's logically possible exists
I don't think that
out there?
anything that's logically possible exists. I think that because something could be logically possible, but not nomologically possible.
Can you give me an example of something that's logically possible and cannot exist?
Sure. So something that is nomologically possible, or something that is logically possible but not nomologically possible, is me levitating myself out of my chair using just the power of my mind. That's something that's logically possible, but it's not nomologically possible. I don't have telekinesis.
Why make that distinction of nominally logic? I can't even say that word. Nominally logical, possible,
Nomologically, because the reason is
nominologically.
on paper, if we're doing like logic, there's no logical contradiction in me using a superpower telekinesis to levitate myself like Yoda or something. But there is a contradiction with the laws of physics. They do not allow that. It's not it's like it's not it's excuse me, it's not nomologically possible. So because something's logically
Yeah, so I mean,
possible, I don't
that's
just grant that
still
it is possible in general. Like it's not logically possible.
we're just creating a third option that's unnecessary here. I mean, either things are possible or they're not possible, right? I mean, you would agree to that. Like, if the laws of
Yeah,
physics would allow that to happen, it's possible. What's not possible is a squared circle, for instance.
yeah, that's a
So
lot. Yeah, it's a logical impossibility.
yeah, so all logical possibilities can exist, either in this universe or some other universe. Um, so I just don't see the need for me to prove anything, besides just claiming that if a perfect being is logically possible and that perfect being exists,
Hmm.
I can walk away from this discussion just saying that. But
I just
I
don't think
won't
that
do
God
that.
is logically possible.
Oh, really? What's the contradiction in God's
Sure. So
existence?
like and again, it does depend on how you define God, right? But like I would say that God is something that is like it's like one, it's personal, right? It's somebody. It's like it's a person. It's like it's a who. It's not a what. It's got like a mind, feelings, opinions, and things like this. It's got a will. It's not just like a force of nature, and it's something that created the universe, or at the very least is the necessary foundation for the universe. Um, but if you've got a situation where God exists alone, uh, and creates the universe, I think the contradiction lies right there. Because in order to create the universe, you would have to create the fabric of space-time that is our universe, and that includes time. Now, time is the axis upon which change is possible. So, without time, there is no change. If you instantiate a change, then you are using time to differentiate between the first state and the second state. So, if there is a state where there is no change because it's just God, and there's no time yet, God is in a timeless state. People will say he's outside space and time, right? So, if there is a changeless, it's like an unchanging state, it would be logically impossible for it to change into a state where there is time, or to into a state where there's change, because it's an unchanging state. That which is unchanging cannot change. Hey, we got a tiny raid. Hey,
Okay.
thank you all the tiny raiders who are over here. Thank you, Tiny Science, for raiding. I don't know if you're requesting. Let me check. He's not. Tiny raid, baby. Yeah, I also see Ems slid in here sneakily. I see you, Ems. Anyways, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think I would have an issue with your premise, that says or implies. I don't know how you put it, but I would say that the premise that creation would require God to change from not creating to creating. So I would say it confuses a change in the world with a change in God.
Okay.
So yeah, so in my theology, I'm a Muslim. In my theology, a change in God, and there's distinction between a change in God and a change in what God creates. So the created universe changes from non-existent to existence,
Right.
right? I mean, that does
Okay.
not imply
Let me ask
that
you a
God
question
changes.
then. Right, so God doesn't change, but the state of the universe changes from not existing to existing. So there's a state where, but would you say that there's a state where the universe does not? Okay, I think you actually already said that. So there's a state where the universe doesn't exist and that God is alone. So the state of affairs is God is alone and there's no universe. Now God does not change. So if God in his unchanging state, we'll say he's in state X, I suppose, where his will is one thing and his actions are just one thing, they're not changing. Now, if they don't change, then suddenly you've got the universe that happens, but God didn't change. So God could not have possibly been the catalyst for that. Because in order for God to do that, he would have had to do something. But if he's not changing, he's not doing anything, right? If God doesn't change and the universe exists, and the universe comes into existence, and we're saying that that's because of God, what is different about God instantiating the universe, but before when we had God in the exact same state, it wasn't sufficient to instantiate the universe. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, to say before creation, um, I mean, this is the, I think, typically timeless creator objection, right? By several, I think, atheist philosophers bring up all the time. But your hidden premise, again, you're sneaking in an assumption without proving it. Your argument seems to be that God is identical in every respect. If God is identical in every respect, he cannot produce a different effect. Therefore, the universe cannot begin. But here, the premise too, I would say, is exactly what you need to prove. Is, I would say that I think you're treating God like a physical object inside time. You
No.
keep saying that what is different about God? I mean, nothing. I would agree with to that. God does not become more powerful. He does not gain new desire. He does not acquire new knowledge. He does not enter a new state. Um, so I would say that I think you're confusing sufficient conditions with temporal effects.
No, hang on. Let me
You
see
know,
if I can. Maybe I can like.
there was no before. Like, I think you're imagining in an earlier moment where God failed
Well,
to
no, it
create.
wouldn't be a temporal before. It would be like a, a, a metaphysical priority. So let me see if I can. I'm gonna type out something here. Um, would you say that God is sufficient for the creation of the universe?
God is sufficient for the creation of the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, God is the cause for. What do you mean by sufficient?
Um, if God is the cause, then God would need to be sufficient. Unless God needs something external to himself to instantiate the universe. Like God alone is all that it takes. God plus I guess his will, which is also God. He doesn't
Yeah, I
need to
mean,
bring in anything other
usually
than himself.
decision making. So that's why I think you're conflating the decision making of a human being, which is either the motive for that decision making is deficiency of like of like lack of knowledge. But there's a different type of motive that God does it out of his wisdom or out of his free will to do something. It's not necessarily an external factor that's forcing God to make decisions.
Okay, so then God alone is sufficient. You don't need anything other than God to create the universe. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sufficiency. I don't think sufficiency would mean that the effect exists eternally. Um, if A is
Yeah,
sufficient for B, then whenever A exists, B must also exist.
right. Yeah,
This
you
I would
understand
say
that.
that, but
Yeah.
no, but I would say I'm saying this is false. I mean, I'm you assuming this. So consider this
That would
proposition.
only
God,
follow like that would really only be the case like that if God is sufficient for the universe, then the universe exists. That like it would only be the case eternally if God doesn't ever change. So if God changes like from being not sufficient to sufficient, then like what you're saying would make sense. But if God never changes and he's sufficient to create the universe, then as long as he's sufficient, the universe exists. And if there's a certain point where God does exist without the universe, that means he's not sufficient to create the universe. But if he doesn't change, then he's always not sufficient to create the universe.
I would say those are two different claims. Like saying God is sufficient and saying God is sufficient to produce an eternal universe are two different things. Um, I mean,
So they're
again,
not
you
godless.
keep. I think you are kind of sneaking in the idea that God's will, um, as if it is a physical trigger, right? I mean, God. So I think you're imagining God like without willing state, and then you're imagining God starts willing, and the universe appears. I mean, we reject that. So God never acquires a new will. His
Hmm.
will is eternal. So the universe begins exactly when his eternal will specifies or manifests.
And when is that? When does that happen?
That's when God decides to create time and space and all these things. So
So
the decision
are
making
you
doesn't
saying
imply imperfect.
there's a moment like there's a moment when God decides to create time?
No, his will is eternal. Like there's a distinction there.
Okay.
That's only true for human beings. Like a decision means moving from one option to the other, because human beings deliberate. We lack knowledge. We discover reasons. So God does not need those things. His eternal will is not preceded by ignorance or uncertainty or some sort of deliberation.
Right. Then like
Um,
it would mean, but that would still mean that the universe is just eternal, because God would be operating from this like meta perspective where he's atemporal from our standard, or you can say that he exists in no time, so he's always in a state where he's just static. But his eternal will is that the universe exists um, at a certain time, but that only makes sense within the causal chain. That only exists within the axis of time. So the universe would still exist eternally with God. But I think this only makes sense if you also hold to B theory. Do you hold to B theory of time?
I mean, it would make like so the manifestation of a universe existing, um, like that knowledge existed eternally. I could argue that. I could state that. I mean, I don't have an issue with saying that the idea of universe existing was there eternally in God's knowledge. Um,
I'm asking,
so
do you know what B theory of time is? Like, do you understand my question when I ask if you hold to that?
mm, no, I don't understand the
It
difference
just
between
means,
the A
okay, so
theory
like,
and B theory.
right, so the A theory is presentism. Only the present exists. The past used to exist. It doesn't anymore. It's not actual. Only the present is actual, and the future is not actual yet. Doesn't exist yet. That's what the difference is. And then B theory is that all moments are actual. So the past and the future and the present are all equally real. We just feel like we're passing through moments. It feels like the present is the only thing that's actual from our purview.
Uh, but I think in both the way you explained it, in both A and B theory, I don't think you still have a good argument, because even if,
I'm just
let's say,
asking
even if
if you
B
hold to
theory was
that.
true,
Like,
right?
okay.
Uh,
Do you
so
well first like
supposedly,
do you like which one do you think is true in your view?
um,
Maybe you haven't thought about it enough, I guess.
I don't have a position on that. Like,
I because
suppose,
the reason I say that it would only make sense in B theory, which is I hold to B theory, so that's that would be a point for you, and then I would just go to a different issue. But if we got A theory, then this would necessitate God's knowledge changing, because God would have to know. Currently, it is like this moment in time is actual. Moving to now, I know that it's no longer 2:02 a.m. Now I know it's 2:03 a.m. So his knowledge of the present would change because the present changes, and the moments aren't all actual. Do you see what I'm saying?
uh,
So if his knowledge changes, then he would change. So there would be an issue there. But if all moments are actual and God's eternal will is always instantiating the universe, there wouldn't be he's not temporal. He's not leading up to the existence of the universe. There's no time that passes between God willing the universe and the universe existing. The universe would necessarily have to exist for as long as God existed. But the temporal, like the passage of time from our purview, um, we would experience it from whatever this first moment was, or you could even say that there's infinite moments, and this could still be the case. But just all moments would be actual. That's the only thing that really makes sense if we're gonna marry this with uh, God just not ever changing, but still being sufficient to be the foundation of the universe. Does that make sense?
yeah, I would say, like, your explanation of A theory and B theory is fine, but it doesn't establish your earlier conclusion. I think whether only the present exists, which is A theory, or all moments are equally real, which is B theory, neither view by itself shows that a timeless creator must undergo a change to create. I mean, classical theism, or at least in my understanding, God's eternal will determines that time itself has a first moment. So the beginning belongs to creation, not to God. So the question isn't whether A or B theory is true, it's whether an eternal cause must change in order to produce a temporal effect.
What I'm saying
That's
is
the premise.
like you could have a first moment in an eternally existing universe. Like if you've got a B theory that has just a first moment. An example that I give sometimes is roll of film, like a film of a movie. It has a first frame and a last frame, but all the frames exist equally. Like they don't need to be infinite. They could still, if God has always had this film of the universe where each slice of time is just a frame, like on a film, for example, it could exist because he wills it to exist, and we would be passing through time and the causal chain, feeling like there's like a passage of time, but really we're just the characters on the movie. We're like one frame of us, we're about to jump, and the next frame we are jumping, right? We just experience it that way. Whereas from a meta perspective, God has this bird's eye view, and all moments would exist equally, but it still have a beginning. You see what I'm saying? Like within the context of time, it would still have a beginning.
Yeah, but again, all of this, I don't want to keep dragging this subject, but like your initial claim was this is a logical impossibility. I still fail to understand how this is a
Okay. So all right. So like,
logical impossibility.
before I move to that, do you understand why it wouldn't make sense under A theory, why it would entail a contradiction because of God's knowledge changing?
I mean, it seems like you're no longer like arguing against God. I mean, you're proposing a more like philosophical model of time that you think is compatible with God's eternal will. I
I
think,
am arguing
from what I
against
understood,
God.
what you said just so far. I mean, so here, let me understand if your analogy is correct. You're saying the universe is like an entire reel of film, right? And every frame exists all at once, and the film has a first frame and a last frame, and that God eternally knows and wills the entire film, right?
I'm saying it could have a
And
first and
but
last frame. That's the only thing I would say. That's like it's
and as human beings, we are experiencing the film frame by frame. I mean,
right. Yeah.
yeah, this is. I don't think this is distinct from the B theory of time. Still don't see the contradiction. In fact, I would say that this
No,
analogy
that is
may
B
even
theory.
undermine.
Like that is the B theory of time.
Yeah, but it kind of undermines your earlier objection. It seems like you're contradicting yourself. You earlier you were arguing that a timeless God cannot create because he would have to change. Now you're saying that God eternally has a whole film. If the whole
I
space-time
was saying
film is
that like
eternally willed,
because you said that he eternally wills the universe into existence, and I was saying that only makes sense under a B theory of time. A lot of theists don't hold the B theory for some reason. I think it
yeah,
makes more
it's
sense. Like if you so then I was just asking you, and it seemed like you didn't know. So then I started to explain it. That's all I'm doing now is trying to make you understand why B theory would have to be the one. Um, so like okay, but what my I guess I don't know if I'm getting through to you on this, but if you want to go back to me critiquing the contradiction, or me like stating the contradiction, then I can go back to that. So basically, if God is like the creator of the universe, to create something is to bring it into existence. And if God is always and eternally bringing it into existence, then it never actually was brought forth into existence. It simply always was actual. Because God's will was always to actualize it. There was never a state when God was not actualizing it, because he always had a will to actualize it, and that's sufficient. So if God is actualizing it, it's actual. Meaning he didn't create it. Meaning we don't need like to look for anything deeper. If the universe is always actual, if God is necessary for it, by the transitive property, the universe would also just be necessary. If the universe is necessary, we don't really need to look any further than the universe.
I would disagree with your premise that says if God eternally actualizes the universe, then the universe must be eternally actual. I mean, I think you're assuming that an eternal act must have an eternal effect. I don't agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
can you explain why?
you just please. but you just asserted it. Like the onus is on you. I think. I think you're confusing the
Okay, so
act
all
of
right.
willing with the content of the willing of the will.
So no, like, just to be clear, when God is always willing for it to exist. Okay, he does not change. Now, and you're saying that when the universe is actual, there is no like temporal there's no passage of time that happens from God willing it into existence up to the point where it comes into existence, right?
Um, just want to clarify what do you mean by actual or actualizing in your like usage over here?
Like the universe existing.
I
Like when
mean,
God
for us,
when
actualizing
God
is a process, right? I mean, for like something actualizing, like if there's no building, then you build, and then the house exists, right? There's an
yeah, right.
actualization
Right, yeah,
process.
yeah, and we go through that process because we exist in time, so we would like take steps to change the environment around us into something like a building, and it would take us time in order to create. We would go from a temporal state where there is no building and move through time to where there is a temporal state where there is a building. But it seems like you're saying God doesn't do that. But you're also saying that it's not the case that the universe has always existed. But I think those are the only two options. Either God moves through time to create, where he is going from a moment where he has not created to a moment where he has, or he is eternally creating because he can't change. And if he's eternally creating, then the universe would have always existed. That just logically follows.
Mm, I'm like so lost in this, honestly.
It's all
I
right,
mean,
man. You know,
it should be so. Again, going back to um the two options, right? God is in time, uh, or God is timeless,
right.
right? These are the only two options.
Those are the only two options.
Um,
Oh, hang on.
yeah.
I got
So the
somebody. I got
problem
my
is,
friend requesting. He loves this topic.
Cyber D D D D D D D Cyber deconstruction. Never go back shot. Cyber D D D D D not construct.
Cyber deconstruction.
I do love this topic. So I guess a way we could break this down, make sure we're just not talking past each other, would be premise one would be whatever is eternally actual is never non-existent, and P2, whatever is non-existent has always existed. Conclusion, therefore, what is eternally actual has always existed. So it'd be like at all points in time. So if we're using like the B theory of time, and we're using the cassette tape, it would mean that the universe existed at the beginning of the show, of the movie, and it continues to exist throughout the movie. Whereas the idea of like a creation, if God like created, then that would mean that at the beginning of the movie there is no actual universe, and then at some point in the movie, God creates and actualizes the universe.
okay.
So
And
yeah, go ahead.
what's your
That's if God is
I
in
guess what's the
time.
point?
Like that's an example of if God is operating within time. And if God's in time, then he didn't create. He's not an ultimate being. He didn't create the entire universe, as we would call at least I would consider the universe to be like all of reality.
Correct.
So
Like time, God would be dependent on time, right? Not the other way around. If that's the case, if God was in time.
I'm a little confused about your definition of actual, because I think it shifts from like you're saying, so premise one is whatever is eternally actual is never non-existent. Then you're saying God's act of actualizing is eternal, therefore the universe has always existed. I don't think it follows, because the term actual is being used in two different ways here. I think you're
I think it's
committing a
synonymous with
fallacy.
exists. Like I think that
So
something's
actual
actual because it
means.
P1.
exists.
Yeah,
So
I
in
can give
P1,
you. I can give
actual mean,
you a
just let me
definition.
clarify what I think is the problem. So in P1, I think your actual means the thing itself exists. In P2, actualizing refers to God's eternal creative will or willingness or willing. I don't think it's the
Actual
same.
is not in P2. P2 is whatever is never non-existent has always existed. Actual is not in P2 at all. But all actual means, when we're talking about like in the Aristotelian or Thomistic tradition, what it would mean is that existing in reality or having a capacity fully realized rather than being merely possible or potential.
Yeah, like it could just be synonymous with exists.
Mhm.
I think it's a better word for these types of conversations because we can say actualize or actualized instead of like came into existence. I don't think that exists has a word like that, like existifies or some shit. Yes, I think that actual is just like a better word.
Like, for example, I'm thinking about eating a hamburger. So me eating a hamburger is a potential. But once I eat that hamburger and I'm eating it, that's when it's become actualized. I'm actually doing it.
Of course, under B theory, it's always actual, just not at that moment in time when you're thinking about it.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the assumption here is that we're assuming that it applies to God in the same way that it applies to creation.
And why doesn't
apply
it?
to God? Like, in what
So,
way does it apply
so
to
you're saying
God?
potential is as something that could happen, right? Is that an actualized is a potential becomes actual? Is that your definition?
Yes.
For humans, I mean, for humans, potential is just I might eat a hamburger. I might eat a sandwich.
No, something
But
that
the
could.
actual, yeah.
Not might, it's something that could. Like, for example, before God created the universe, before he actualized the universe, it was just a potential universe.
Yeah, you're
And then
assuming.
once he actualized the universe, once it came to be, once it became reality, then it was actualized.
Yeah, that's like assuming God has potentials to realize.
Right, and if
We
the
agree with
universe,
that.
if there's ever a state where the universe didn't exist but God did, if God had no potential, then the universe could not have possibly come into existence because there was no potential for God to do that.
No, but yeah, but pure actuality, we understand God to be is in the state of pure actuality, in the sense that he has no unrealized potential. He does not move from like one state to the other to complete himself. So when you say that God actualizes, what do you mean by actualize? If you like, do you mean that God undergoes a transition from not creating to creating, or
So this is right.
do
So
you
this is what
mean?
we've been talking about this whole time. It's called the Proclus dilemma, is what I've been talking about this whole
Yeah.
time. Either God is moving from one state to the next, where he has potential to create, then he creates, but that puts him in time, which makes him not like the ultimate being, or God is eternally acting. He's all actual. He's timeless. But that just means that the universe always existed because he's always actualizing, and there's not like a passage of time that goes from his will of actualizing to the actual, because time is the thing that's allegedly being created here in the first place, right? So as soon as God wills it, it is. There's no like loading or buffering or anything that has to happen. As soon as God wills it, it is. If God's always willing it, then it always is. So either the universe always existed, or God, which means that God never brought the universe into existence, or God is in time creating, which makes him not the ultimate being.
So you're saying if God changes, therefore he is in time. If God never
Yes.
changes, therefore the universe is eternal.
Correct.
I would disagree. I would say that this is a false dichotomy, maybe, or you're assuming there's no third option.
What would be
I
the
mean,
third
this is
option?
the third option is so God's will is eternal. Okay, God's will is eternal, while the object of His will is a universe whose existence begins with the first moment of created time.
hmm
So you haven't shown how this is an impossibility. You just denied it. Like, I mean, I think you're saying it as soon as God wills it, it is, right? So
Yeah,
that statement itself only makes sense if as soon as refers to a temporal sequence in God. But there's no as soon as in a timeless
that's the
reality.
point. Like that's the
For
point.
God,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's exactly
yeah,
the
for
point.
God, there isn't first willing, then waiting, then creating. There's
That
only the
correct.
eternal divine will. Okay, the
Yes.
temporal sequence exists within creation, not with God.
It's
So
like
there's an
like
assumption there.
so I just don't get it. Like it seems like you're doing the math perfectly right, but then you get the answer wrong. Like you're carrying the one the same way I would. You're doing PEMDAS correctly the same way I would, but then like I'm getting the answer 2 and you're getting the answer like 7 and I'm just like how? Like
Yeah,
cuz it
but I
seems like you're
demonstrated
following.
that.
It feels like you're following, but then your conclusion is way off from what the logic leads to.
Yeah, but I demonstrated why you're having the trouble because I think there was a false dichotomy. I think there was a third option,
Yeah, what is the
right?
third option?
I gave you the third option.
You said it
So I
okay,
said,
so you said that's like a God's will actualizes a first moment, right? Is that what you're saying?
so God's will is eternal, while the
Right.
object of His will is a universe whose existence begins with the first moment
Right.
of created time. So
Correct.
God,
So
you have to
yeah, of
disprove
created
this as an
now
impossibility.
this first okay, we can say that there's a first moment. Now God's will would instantiate this first moment of created time. That's your view?
Yeah.
Just make sure I'm okay. So like that means that if God wills for this first moment to be actual, there's no time that passes between him willing and for this moment to be actual, this first moment. So as long as God is willing, this first moment is actualized. Now, if God's will never changes and is eternal, that means that there's never really a time when this first moment is not actualized, or it has at least started the thing. As long as God exists, this first moment is brought into being. There's no waiting period, as you were like agreed with me. There's like as long as God's willing it, this moment's actual.
Well, and I
Yeah.
guess the deeper question would be though is right. So if it's God's will, right, has the universe been actualized since God came into being, or was there a moment when God was not actualizing the physical universe, and then He was physically actualizing the universe, or actualizing the physical universe? And did he decide when to actualize the physical universe?
I would say that I think I mean if I think the mistake here is to say that as long as God wills it, the first moment is actual. That sentence is not true unless you smuggle in some sort of
Well,
I'm
time
not
into
saying
God.
that.
if
I'm
God,
not
okay,
saying that.
let me see if I can
I mean,
maybe so if God is willing for this first moment to be actual, what would like prevent the first moment from being actual?
say that again.
If God is willing for the first moment to be actual, what would prevent that first moment from being actual?
Mm, I mean, you're assuming that something is holding it back, right? You're assuming something is holding back the first moment.
No, it seems like that's what
Um,
you're doing. I'm like
there's nothing that prevents it. I would say. I mean, the
because
first moment
if God's will is
exists.
eternal, if God's
Hmm.
will to create this first moment is eternal, and there's nothing that can prevent it, then as long as God has this will, which is timeless,
The
then
first
the
moment
first moment
exists.
exists.
The first moment exists because God eternally wills it to exist.
Correct. So
But
there's never
yeah, if
a
you're
state
saying,
there's never a state where the universe doesn't exist then, because God's will to instantiate the universe is eternal.
are you
Well,
saying then it's always actual? Is that what you're saying?
That seems like what you're saying, but like again, you're just like you're doing the logic to
Yeah,
get
but
there
I
and then
mean, over
denying the
here,
logical conclusion.
well,
I
and
think
that's why
there's
I
some
asked
sort
the
of
clarifying question.
you're
The
changing.
clarify.
I think you're changing the meaning of always. Always is a temporal word. It means at every moment, right? But there's no moments before the first moment.
That's why I'm
So
using the term
asking,
state,
so
not
asking, so
moment.
asking, wasn't the first moment already actual? Is like asking what happened before the beginning of time. It's the
Well,
same. It's a
Exactly.
senseless.
No, exactly. Like, because there
Yeah.
would be no before this first moment, because this moment would always have existed, because God would have always been willing it, because God's will is eternal, right?
well,
So,
and
like,
that's why.
man,
Well, I was going to say that's why I asked. The question that I asked is whenever God came into being, right? Um, is
No,
that the
God is.
moment when the universe?
No, God has always existed. What do you
Well,
mean
yeah,
came?
I get that, but run with me here, right? Whenever God came into existence, if God's always been existent, sure, that's fine. Is that when the universe began to be physically actualized, or has God just eternally been willing the universe, and then he decided, now I'm going to physically actualize the universe?
Again, I mean,
It has to be one or the other.
that's why it's a
no.
dilemma.
So I would say no to that question. God does not eternally will the universe and then later make a new decision. Like His will is
No,
eternal.
we're talking about
but
the actualizing of the universe, right?
so the will is eternal. The content of the eternal willing is that universe begins with its first moment. There's no second decision, or there's no change in God. I think.
And is this God's first moment?
I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Like I said,
Why does that
God
make
does not
sense?
change because you're applying the concepts of time to God.
Well, so
No.
if God is timeless, then he would just exist in like one state, and we don't have to call it a moment. But if there was like a second state he would transition to, then we could call those moments, I guess, if we want to be really careful about the semantics.
Well, and that's why I'm trying to get clear on
Right.
when he actualized the universe, right?
You've got state
Like,
one. You got state one, right? Where God exists
you have
and the
state
universe
one.
doesn't. And then you've got, and we're
Yeah,
not going to
state
say
one, God
moment
by
one.
himself.
State one is God by himself, because the universe has not been created yet. It's not been actualized yet. Then you've got state
Okay.
two, where God has not changed. His will's the same. Everything about him's the same. He's divinely simple, whatnot. But now there's a universe here. So what exactly caused the universe to what caused the transition from state one to state two, where it's God alone, then God with the universe or with creation? Like, what causes the first state to transition to the second state?
I just want to go back just a little bit. So compare these two ideas, right? I want a universe that exists eternally, or I want a universe that begins. The willingness or the willing can be equally eternal in both cases. I mean,
It's
the
fine.
object
That's
differs,
fine. I'm just asking,
right?
but like, what can just answer the question though? Like, so
And I
state one, only God exists. State two, God exists and creation also exists. So what causes the change from state one to state two? Remember, God does not change, right? Because he's simple. His will does not change. So God in state one is not sufficient to create the universe, or else it would already be state two. But if there is state one, where there's God having properties that are equal to X, we'll say, then in state two, God still has properties equal to X, but now the universe exists. What causes the change from state one to state two?
and keep in mind, state one is without an actualized universe. You have an eternally willed universe, but no actualized universe.
Right.
State two is still that eternal willing of a universe, but there is an actualized universe.
Um. So there is no transition between the two divine states. That's my direct response. So, um,
So then,
So
I
has
think
one of
the
those
actualized
states.
universe always been here?
yeah, I mean, you're kind of imagining two divine or two successive divine conditions, like state one, right? There's God alone. State two, God plus the universe. But the succession itself is a temporal concept.
Right.
If God is
Exactly.
timeless, there is no sequence of divine states.
Exactly. Which
So
means that state
the
2 would be
hidden
the only true
assumption.
state. State 2 would just be the only true state, where there is never, ever, ever any possibility of state 1 existing. And that's been the point of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it's an impossibility if God's will is unchanging and his will is to actualize the universe, that state 1 where God exists without the universe is even possible. It's just it doesn't make any logical sense.
Yeah, I
And you're
mean
stating, and you're
that's
like
where
agreeing
the
with us here.
difference. No, no. What I'm saying is there's a difference between relational change and intrinsic change. So you're saying God alone, right? That's your first premise. Then you're
That's the
saying,
first state.
oh no, not or first state. Then God with creation. So um, did so what changed? Did God's knowledge change? No. Did God's will change? No. Did God's power change? No.
Wait.
So the only thing
Actually, I
that
want to ask you a
changed.
question about that. Like, so God's knowledge doesn't change from state 1 to state 2. So in state 1, there's no actualized universe, and God would know that there's no actualized universe. But in state 2, there is an actualized universe, and God's knowledge would still be that there's no actualized universe, or would he just be wrong
So
about the universe existing?
the only thing that changed is that creation exists now. So that's a relational change.
Does God know?
I mean,
Does God know that?
that the universe, yeah, of course, God is all knowing,
But when there was no universe,
or
did he know
eternally
that there was
knowing.
no? But when there was no universe, did he know that there was no universe?
I mean, like I said, like there's no transition in God. Um,
So if God, okay, if
I
God
think
is not what's changing, the state changes where, because just to be clear, you do hold that there is at least one state where God exists without the universe, right?
sorry, say that again.
I just want to make sure that I understand your position correctly. Do you believe that there is that, or there are like it's hard to not use temporal language, but I'm not talking in a temporal sense. There was a state where at one point only God existed. Like that, at some point there was a true state of affairs where only God exists and nothing else, including the universe. Right? Is that your position?
Um, I would say, yeah, I
Okay.
would say that
So, all
God.
right. And then state 2 is where God exists with the universe. Now, keeping in mind God does not change. You're saying that it's a relational change. The property of knowing that the universe exists would be somewhat of a Cambridge property. Well, I don't know if it's a Cambridge property or not, but we'll just go ahead and say that it's a relational change. The environment around God changes, but God does not change. So God was not taking any different actions. So then there is a different cause to this universe, because the environment
No, I
around
mean,
God is changing, but God is not doing anything different than he was doing in state 1. So if he's doing the exact same thing as he was doing in state 1 in state 2, um, then the state 1 would just be identical to state 2, right? If God were responsible for the universe.
Well, and the question would be
yeah.
too, like, if nothing at all about God's knowledge differs between a world with no creation and a world with creation, then in what sense does God actually know which world would exist?
Uh, I mean, I would say God's knowledge does not differ. The object known differs. So God eternally knows himself. God knows all possibilities, and God eternally knows which possibility he eternally wills to actualize. There's no point at which God first knows there's no universe.
But there's a universe where there's no actual creation, and then we have a world where there is actual creation. How does God know if his knowledge doesn't change which world exists?
Yeah, I mean, so God eternally knows propositions like the universe does not exist prior to its first moment. The universe exists from the first moment onward. I mean, I think the
You can't
mistake,
use that.
the
You're putting
objection.
you're having God put himself in time. Like if you're gonna put us in constraints of not using time words, you yourself can't contradict yourself and then start using time words.
So just to address the objection here, like I would say that you're assuming God's knowledge has to track the universe as it changes, as our does. For
And why
for
wouldn't it?
us, for us, maybe first I know that room is empty, then later I know that someone entered the room. So my knowledge changes because I acquire new information. For God, there is no acquisition of new information. No,
There
He
is.
eternally. No, there is not. Like, why do you believe that?
Because there is a moment, there's a world where no creation has been actualized, and then we have a world where a universe is actualized.
I don't know. I feel like we're
That's
going
that's an
in
intrinsic
circles. Like,
change.
I think the best, analogy I could give for this entire conversation is imagine an author who has written an entire novel, right? So the author knows that chapter one contains no king, and chapter five introduces the king. So the author's knowledge doesn't change whether the reader reaches chapter five or not. The difference lies in the story, not in the author's knowledge. So likewise, God eternally
Wait.
knows.
Give me that again. Sorry,
So
I had a squirrel moment.
So imagine an author who has written or writes a novel, or is about to write a novel.
Yeah.
The author knows that chapter one contains no king, and then chapter five introduces the king, or whatever the story is. So the author's knowledge doesn't change when the reader reaches chapter five. The difference lies in the story itself, not in the author's knowledge.
It is a
So
little bit
just like
it is a little bit disanalogous for a couple of reasons. One, the author would obviously have to undergo time to create the book, but there's a moment in time where the book does not exist, and then the author passes through time to create the book. But it also there's another disanalogy where if I don't know if you have a stance on your theory of time yet or not, but if it is the case that you hold to a theory, then the author would be actualizing one page at a time and destroying the page that he's done with to create the next page. Whereas if it's a B theory of time, all the pages exist because like time for us, we would be in the story, right? This is like an analogy with God. We would be characters in the story. The pages would represent time. All of the pages would exist in the author's book at once. And whenever the author wills to create the book, then he would act upon it, and once he acts upon it, then it would exist. So the author would undergo time. If it were analogous, then as soon as the author wills for that first page to exist, it would exist.
And again, I think this is also missing a point as well. So I'll make another point too, and then you can either come after mine or go after Loeb's. But let's say I grant that, like an author who sees all of the book, God sees all of the history, just like an author sees an entire manuscript. That's going to explain why God doesn't have to wait for events. But what it doesn't explain is why the manuscript or creation has a first page instead of existing eternally. So keep in mind, my question isn't about God's perspective. It's about why an eternal act produces a universe with a beginning.
so. I'm not arguing that the eternal act mysteriously or arbitrarily produces a temporal effect. I mean, I'm saying that the eternal act is the eternal willing of a temporal effect.
Well, the author has been willing to write a book. right? But they just never did. The book never became actual until the author put pen to paper. Then the book became actual, right? Likewise, God could have been willing a universe, but it never became actual until something happened and God decided to will a universe into actualization. That's what we're talking about. So I'm glad you brought up the book analogy because I think it fits this perfectly.
Hey, I'm actually gonna go ahead and call it. We've been going kind of in circles for a while, and it's past the time, so we'll all go do a raid. We should raid Board Agnostic, because I don't think we've done
And
a
thanks
Board
for being
Agnostic raid in a while.
respectful.
Yeah, you've been cool. I've been really trying to get through to you, and I know you've been probably just as frustrated with us. But this has been very civil, and I really do appreciate that. There was no ad homs or anything out of either of us, so this has been. I think this is a W for everybody involved on the panel.
Man, take care.
Yeah, you have a good one, man. Cyber, thanks for joining me tonight, bro.
Not a problem, man. What was he? So it sounds like he was trying to run a Thomistic argument.
I don't know. I mean, he's Muslim, but maybe.
Yeah. So he probably wasn't running. So yeah, because Thomas will what Thomas will try to say is that like
Or is that the last guy? I got him. Maybe I'm getting them confused.
he might have been a Muslim because I was reading chat and there were some people in there mentioning Allah, so he might have been a Muslim. But like the Thomas like argument is because that's where you get like the God has been eternally willing it, which is why like in the syllogisms you have to make sure you acknowledge actualization, and then they'll try to do where you brought up the Cambridge thing. You do those, but instead of like trying to argue the Cambridge thing, what you argue then is you would just argue the causal relation to it because causal relation is still a change.
Right.
They just try to argue that point, but I freaking hate Thomas.
One thing that's really interesting about when you think about change as like the progression from one moment to the next, and then you think about how time is like just a fourth axis of space-time, where all the moments are actual. We just pass through it in one direction. We don't go in a different direction, and there's supposedly only one axis of time. There's not like three like we have for the spatial dimensions. A change is like just a different location on that axis. So you could also call a change something that is here to something that is there along, say, the z-axis. Like you could say that this mouse and this can, there is like a change between them, even though there's no temporal change. It's just a change along a different spatial axis, or several axes. Like this like statically existing. If you were to transition from I guess like acknowledging one versus the other, there is a change. Yeah. It's like really fucking fascinating to think of change in that way, where while things are static, change is something that we just perceive, and something being in a different location, we don't call it a change just because we see it all. It's just like really fucking interesting to me. But yeah, man. Yeah, thanks again for coming up, man. And maybe I'll see you tomorrow. I think I got Ogar on tomorrow, but yeah. I'm excited for TSP. We got some people joining up for that.
Nice. And I was excited to see you on panel with Forrest. I know you were pretty excited to meet him.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, for anybody in the chat, I was on panel with Forrest Valkai on Recovering from Religions Live. So that was really cool.
Like not on panel as a guest, but as a co-host with Forrest.
I was a guest technically, actually. No, I literally was a guest. But I was uh it was stated that I've been a host of Recovering from
Yeah, that's
Religion
what
a
I
couple
was
of times.
thinking. Yeah, I thought you were one of the hosts for it. So that's
It
why I
does
made
seem
that.
like that. It does seem like that. But yeah, but everybody else on that panel is gonna be hosting TSP as well. So except for I didn't mention it to Forrest. I feel like he won't open the DM, but I guess I could reach out to him.
Yeah,
He
and
might
I
have
did
already
talk.
forgotten who I am.
Fair. I did talk to my friend Peachy. Though I need to talk with her more. We might resurrect Reason and Rebellion with her as the second co-host with it, and then if I can get Jaren on, maybe once a month. Get Zach Laser Hoffman on once a month. Think it'd be fun. Do you think though? Do you think we should keep it as an atheist debate space, or do you think we should do what Jaren and I was doing and debate different topics?
I don't know. It's entirely up to you. So it just depends on what like Reason Rebellion is supposed to be, right? Like if you keep the name and change the style, it's a different thing with the same name. So like
Yeah. So initially, what it was supposed to be is so Jaren. While well, you got to read page 3. I'm not going to give away Jaren's stuff here. You got to read page 3 of his book. But he doesn't want to. He didn't want to host those debates because there's so many other creators on here that do it. So he's not really interested in debating the does God exist or not argument. And then he does, his main topic every day. So he's like, I really want to do, different things, talk about conspiracy theories, just talk about different things, and we're the reason in rebellion. Um, and so that's where the name, kind of what sparked the name. He and I went through this whole elimination process for like a week deciding on a name. And then we both came up with the logo idea, and then he's the one who actually like designed the logo.
R&R, baby.
Yep, R&R. So yeah, I'll talk with Peachy though, but I think it'd be fun if we had like weekly co-hosts on it.
That could be cool. Yeah.
So hey, maybe we'll get you on there once a week.
Mayhaps. Maybe once a month. Once a week is going to be a lot to commit to because like
Once I see how. I'm kidding. No, that's fair.
because I already do these 3 or 4 times a week, and then I'm going to be doing TSP. I'm probably going to be doing TSP once a week personally, and then other people are going to be doing. But I don't know if I'll need to like physically start the stream myself, or if I'll trust people with passwords and to like do it right or what have you. So I don't know what else going to go into that. So I could be really bogged down with that, and then I'm going to want days off from streaming, of course. So like
Yeah.
doing another thing once a week would be, I think, a lot. It's already a lot doing just
Yeah.
mine.
Are you running this same topic tomorrow?
I
I'm just asking because you got
think
be baptized in Jesus Christ down there. I know you're trying to end, so be baptized. I believe Lobes is going live tomorrow, around the same time. Well, like an hour or two earlier. So come here tomorrow and debate Lobes. Tell Lobes while he's wrong. Come give Lobes the verbal slap down.
yeah. I suppose I could. I suppose I could do the same topic again because if I have Ogar on, like part of me wants to do the like what's your evidence for God and just talk about existence because that's all he does. But then there's another part of me that's like, let's switch it up. I think I did this topic with him last time just to like make things a little bit interesting, and we talked about the first prompt the whole night. So it's like
That's
it's nice to
fair.
mix things up a little bit sometimes. But
That's fair.
anyway,
But be baptized. I can answer your question just real quick, though. What makes Satan better is that Satan unalives like billions of people less than what God does. God straight up unalives an entire world for conditions that he set up himself. He set the conditions up himself, and he unalives the entire world for it.
This is true. Yeah, that's basically long and short of it. Satan doesn't really do a whole lot. Whoever has the higher kill count between serial killers is like the worst serial killer, in my opinion. Like they're both like irredeemable, but you've
Be
got like
baptized.
one that's worse.
Yeah, what did Satan lie about? I'm curious, can you point in the Bible where Satan lied? I would love to hear one verse where Satan
Tune
tells a
in
lie.
next time to hear
next time.
the verse where Satan lies. Anyway, he lied and tricked
Next
the
time
angel. I
on
think that's
Lobes the
fanfic.
Absurdist.
Next time on Lobes the Absurdist. Satan, the father of lies, caught in 0 lies in the Bible. Where's the lie, though? Okay, let's all go raid Board Agnostic. I'll see you guys over there. Peace out.